Hello and welcome. I am Yogesh. Today we are going to learn how to create a, an application called Contact Manager. This is a simple contact manager application that will allow us to store our contacts. Today we are going to learn a few new techniques in this tutorial. So let's get started. First thing, as we are going to build an application that is going to communicate with a backend database server, we need to define our data source. So in the workspace, let's go to the data source and add our data source. We are going to access the data on Supabase. Okay, and Supabase is powered by Postgres. So we will select the database as PostgreSQL. Just name this. So I've named it Contact Manager, host name. As we can see over here, we need to provide host, port, database name, username and password to access our data. So to get this information, we will need to go to Supabase. Here I am inside my project, and in that I am entered the database configuration section where I can see the connection parameters. So first thing we need is the host. So just copy the host, go back over here and paste it. Now we need the database name, which is Postgres. So I will copy the database name and put it over here. As you can see, the port number is different in case of Supabase. So we will copy the port and replace the one that is suggested by Lowcoder. For username, let's take up the username and paste it over here. For password, I've just copied the password and I'm pasting it over here. After all this information is fed, let's click on test connection. If the connection is successful, you will be able to read connection successful at the top. Once this is successful, let's save it. I would like to revise a bit over here. If you want to have a data source which you want to access from multiple applications, then you need to define it at the workspace level in data source section. So the moment you define a data source over here, for example, we have defined a data source called Contact Manager. So now this Contact Manager connection would be available in every application that belongs to this particular workspace. Okay, so now let's go to our apps and go and create a new app. I will rename the app to Contact Manager. There are many other extra settings that we can set over here, like the general app settings, title, description, and you can also assign an icon. We will not use the icon feature, but let's just set it over here. Contact Manager and description. As the name itself is descriptive, I am not going to write anything else than the name of the application over here. The first thing that we need to do over here is to set a data query which will fetch data from Supabase. So let's click on new. When we click on new, and if you look over here, you can see that the contact manager that we had created in the previous steps is visible over here. So let's select this as a connection. Now you have to set the trigger, like how do you want this to trigger, when input change or on page load, or only when you trigger it manually. So let's, because this query is going to fetch data when the application starts, so we need to select input changes or on page load. Now over here we just need to write a simple SQL query that will fetch the data from our Contact Manager database. Okay, so let's go to the Contact Manager database over here and open the API document. Over here, as you can see, you get the name of the fields, and you can also see what you can access and how. So we will just use the table name over here, which is contact. I will just copy this contact table name. I will go back over here and I will say select star, paste it. Now let's run the query to see whether we get the result that we are expecting. Okay, yeah, here we got the result. I will rename the query to get contacts. Now that the query is in place, let's place a table component and connect it to the data source. I'll just enlarge it. Let's move the table component a bit at the end and insert text display. And as usual, we will use the markdown feature and set contact manager. I will pull the table a bit more down to have some gap over here. Now we will configure our table to only show those columns that are necessary and to hide rest of the columns. So we do not want to see the ID column, we do not want to see the created columns. I will just hide them over here. We want salutation, first name, middle name, last name. Okay, we don't want the address detail as on date, so let's just hide it. City, maybe pin code we don't want. State, country, gender we don't want to show. Active we don't want to show. And the contact information, mobile number and email. So now that it is set, we need to also set other features over here, like do we want to show the filter button or not. The filter button is the one over here. So if you shut this, that button will go away. Refresh button will refresh the data, and download button will allow the user to download the data in various formats. So the format currently supported is CSV. Let's hope in future Lowcoder will support exporting to other formats also. But we do not want to download, so I will just hide this button. So we will have two buttons over here. Now over here we can set how do we want the table row size. If you say small, the table row size will go small. If you say medium, it will go. If you say large, it will become bigger. So depending on the size that you want to show to the user, you have to select that. Let's keep it medium as the default currently. Now there are other settings over here that we need to also see, like whether we want to show horizontal scroll bar or not. If the content of your table is not fitting within the given display area, you should always enable this, so that if the user is viewing your application or using your application on a screen with a lower resolution, the scroll bar would become visible. Now that all the columns are set, let us add two more columns. One column will contain the edit button and another column will contain the delete button. Edit button will allow user to edit the contact information, and delete button will allow the user to delete the contact information. Okay, so let's go and add that. We'll go over here. I will say add. So we have two columns, custom column, custom column. Let's go to the first custom column. Over here, the title is irrelevant for us because we are not going to show the title. So let's just switch it off, like turning it off from here. Now let's define a custom value which should be shown in the button. So I will say edit, and I will select this as a button and edit. Let's see how does it look. This is how it should show up. Okay, now let's go to the second column, switch off the show title, switch, and set the things to button and set the custom value to delete. When you select button, you also have option to select the type. Like if you set the default type, it would look in a different way. If you set the text type, it would look like a text, as you can see over here. So depending on what you want, you can select. Let's keep it the default as primary. We can also set the background colors of the column and the text color, etc., but that's for some other day. Okay, now that the columns have been set up, we need to create necessary user interface for the user on using which they should be able to edit the contact or add the contact or delete the contact. So let's go about designing the interface for editing, adding and deleting. Okay, so for this we are going to use modal. So let's go back over here and say modal. We will be using two modal. One modal will be to add a contact and another modal would be to edit the contact. Here we will add necessary fields that will allow the user to add a contact. So let's go to insert and say form. First thing that we need to insert over here is a form control or component. Let's set its width to the maximum. Let's set the title of the form to add contact. Now we will put in necessary input fields. or components. How many fields do we need to put over here? That again depends on the kind of data that we want to capture. So let's go to the contact manager and see what we have at our disposal. So as you can see, there are many fields that we have over here, like salutation, first name, middle name, last name, address 1, address 2, city, pin code, state, country, gender, is active, and mobile. And we can see the data type also that are there, like boolean, var, varchar, text, etc. So let's start with salutation. Let's insert select. Here we need to give the salutation option. So I will go over here, the first option, and then I will select all and say Mr. In value. Come on, what's wrong? Value will be the same thing as the label. Yes. Let's add one more. Mrs. We are not going to set any default value in this particular case. So the user will have to select this. We will make this field as a required field. As the field is required, we can get the red color star over here. So now what would happen? That user will not be able to save the data unless and until this field has some value in it. The second field would be the first name field. Then we'll have middle name and last name field. We will name the content later on. First, just let us just build the UI quickly. So I will copy this field and then again paste it. As we can see, this field is not being accommodable in the given width of the modal. So we may have to work out on the modal. For that, let's go and change the width of the modal, which is default 60, and I will make it, for example, 80%. So now the modal will be 80%. Now let's resize this to make them a bit reasonable. I'll remove this. I will remove this. Here I would like to also change the position of the label. So I want the label to show up on the top over here. So for that, we'll go to the position and set it to top. Now this looks a bit more easy to understand. Now let's copy this field and place it. I'll remove this field over here and adjust it. Let's reduce it by 2 columns. Now that these fields are in place, we will go about adding the other fields, and those are address 1, address 2, city, pin code, state. So address 1, address 2, city, pin code, state, country. So address 1, address 2 would stay in one line, city, pin code and state and country, all of 4 of them would stay in another line. So I'll just select these 2 fields, copy them, select the form and paste. Because the address line can be a long one, so I will just like to enlarge this field. By 4 columns, more than its current size. Below this address 1 and address 2 line, we will have city, pin code or zip code, state and country. So there will be another line of 4 elements. So again, as we had already copied these previously, we can just paste it, but I will just select all the 3 of these. Copy them, select the form and paste them. Unfortunately, there is no way to enlarge all of the selected controls at a time. But so let's go down to each control and set it up. This will be the name of the city, and we don't need this to be so large, so we will make it smaller. The same way, make this smaller. City, then this would be the pin code. And state. I will copy the last one. I want to give the user a list from which they have to select the country. So let's go and put a select control. All that I will do is I will select this and copy it. Select the form, paste it, and let me resize it as per my needs. I will remove the required field at this point, and I will change the arrangement. Let's scroll and say position to top. Now let's adjust this control next to this. Okay. Now let's label all the controls. And country. To add all the names of the countries in a manual way like this as options, it would be a painful process. So we are not going to use this. I'll just delete all of these. Then let's go to map. Here we can provide the data that we want. So I have set up, copy pasted a certain set of data that I would like to show over here. I will remove this. So the starting and the end. After we have set this value, we need to set the label and the value over here. So I will open curly brackets. I will say item dot text. In the same way, in value, item dot value. Over here, value and text are the same, so it doesn't matter, but just for the sake of it, it becomes easier when we have this kind of things. So what we need to understand over here is that when we want to show large amount of data in a drop down, then so it is more convenient to use the map feature of the drop down rather than the manual one to add each option one at a time. Let's see how does it look. And here we have all the names of the countries that we have entered. Great. Now let's go and add the rest of the fields, which are gender, is active, mobile and email. Let's add. Again we will use the same. Copy this control and select the form, paste it. This control should go above somewhere, so let's put it over here. I will drag and drop this again at the, so the rest of the controls get realigned. Let's keep it as it is without any changes and change this to gender. Here we need to change this. Okay, let's see what is gender content. Gender is a where-char or where-char, meaning it can contain text. So we will set the label and value as text. Male, male, female, female, let's remove this option. Now we will add the others, that is mobile, email and is active. For mobile and email we will put the input control, so I will just select these two, copy them, select the form, paste them. Over here mobile number, email. We can also set the validation for email. So let's go over here to the validation section, and from here let's select this as an email and make this a required field. So now if the user would enter any information which is not a valid email, Lowcoder will catch this as an error and not let the user save the data. So these are the fields that I think we need to set them as compulsory data information. Now let's fine tune this layout, because this is looking a bit odd. So what I will do, I will select this salutation and change the position to top. Now I will just resize it so that it's a bit in a well managed size, and then rearrange the fields. Now this looks a bit more easier on the eyes, and the user can also understand the information that has to be entered. Address, city, pin code, state, country. To make them look a bit more uniform, we may need to resize some of our controls. So I will just enlarge these controls by one column. Yeah. Oh, come on. Mobile. Email. Now last control that we need to add is switch. So I will add a switch. active. Okay, so most of our controls have been arranged as per our requirement. Of course, the arrangement is not that aesthetic, but for the tutorial we are not going to spend long time fine-tuning this. Active should be on by default, so it should be switched on, so we need to have a default value to true. When I'm working on a large project, I do not like to have the names set as default or as provided by Lowcoder. I like to name them in a way that is more convenient for me to understand what exactly is happening. So I will rename each and every control. Salutation. First name. Middle name. Last name. I will do this for all the other controls. So I will just pause the video and complete the renaming process. Now that all the fields are renamed and we can see the names over here, we will start creating another data query for saving this data or inserting this data into Postgres. So let's go about doing that. Let's click on new. Again we will select Contact Manager as our data source. This query will only run when triggered manually, and now we need to create an insert query. So by default the insert query is a very simple query and we need to use the insert into command. Okay, so let's go and check the syntax of how we can do it. If we go over here in Postgres and check, like insert row command, what it shows over here is something like this, and this is not what we want. We can't use any of this, so we need to access the help or okay, so let's go to Google and search and the insert query is just simple, like into, you provide the table name, fields name, then values and all the values. So let's just copy this, go over here and paste it. Now we need to put the names of the field as per our requirements from here. So what I will do, I will go to the field section and we will take up all this name one by one. So I will take salutation, contact. Now I will put all the fields over here. This is a problem with Supabase. Salutation, then first name, middle name, paste it, put a comma, put a space, copy it, paste it, comma space address line 1. Now that all the fields have been defined, now let's define the placeholders over here. To work with this, I will just zoom in over here so that it becomes easier for us to work. Let's get rid of the default values over here. Now we need to specify each and every field in the same order as the fields that are defined over here as per the columns names. So here it will be salutation, so I will say form 1 dot salutation. I will copy this and use it for all the fields. I will pause the video again and complete the values. Now that all the names are in place, I'll just try to explain why I have done it like this. Like as you can see, we have named the components in such a way that their names itself makes it easier for us to know what values are going to be inserted at what place. So I will just show it to you. As you can see, do you see the other highlighted one? Okay, address 1, this is address line 2, city, pin code, then we have state, we have country, gender, is active, mobile and email. Let's fold this. Now everything is over here, but as we can see, the values over here are yet empty because there is nothing filled into this. We will be using this feature and testing it later on. So let's rename this query to add contact. After this, we need to design one more modal, and this modal will be used for editing contact. Again, for this we will have to use the technique that we used in in To-Do app. So I will again repeat those techniques as we go forward. Let's first create the data query and the modal for editing our data. Let me select the form and copy the form. Let's go and add a modal. This will be modal 2. I will click inside the modal and I will paste the form. I will edit the heading. This form also will have to be set to 80%. So I will set this to 80%. Unfortunately, all the names of the controls or components that are pasted are automatically changed. So we'll have to again redo the same process of naming them. I will pause the video and rename everything. I have finally renamed all the controls. So what I have done, I have kept the same name as you can see over here, but instead of I mean at the end of every name I have added a number called 2. This is text 2. Okay, so it is address line 1, add line 1, 2, middle name 1, first name, last name, etc. We need to change the form from over here from form 1 to form 2 for this submit button. So now we have the form and in the modal for editing. Now we need to build the necessary logic to pass the value of the form, I mean the value of the selected item to the form. Now let's go to the modal 2. Select each field and assign it the value. So I will say contact data dot value dot and salutation. I will say first name. Again I will set the default value as contact data dot value dot first name. I will do this for rest of the fields. Now that we have assigned all the values except the last one, so I will just put it over there. The default value would be is active. So now the whole of this is completed. The value over here and the value over here are different, so we are not able to see this. Let's go and change it at the database level. So I will go to the contact manager over here and I will edit this. Let the record get updated. Now I will go to get contacts. I will run it. I will click on edit. Now let's open the modal. And there it is. Okay, now we need to program the edit to show the modal. But as you can see, there is no direct way of doing this. You can only perform one single action with this button. So this is what we are not able to use over here. So let's see what we can do. Let's use run JavaScript. This will allow us to write our JavaScript over here. So now we will have to set the values from here. So I will say contact data dot set value current row. Then modal2 dot open modal. This should work, I think so. Let's check it out. Let's click on edit. Wow, it's working. Let's dismiss the modal. Now we need to create one more data query which will update the content of the contact information that we edit in the modal. So for that we will create one more data query, or let's just edit this, duplicate this data query, and now we will edit it. So I will just say let's go to this and see what you need to do to update. Again, it's a very simple query. You just need to say update the table name, and then you need to use a set of values like field name is equal to value, and you need to use this where clause. This is compulsory, because if where clause is not specified, then what would happen is that it would update all the records in your table. So we should not do it like that. We need to be very careful, and we should always give a where clause in update. So it is update, then table name, set, and then field is equal to value. So let's go about doing that. I will remove this from into update contact. Then we will say set. As you can see, it is like this. You don't need to use brackets. So I'll just get rid of the brackets over there. We don't need these brackets. Okay, I'll just open this up into a pop-up, so it becomes easier for us to edit everything. I will remove this bracket. Remove this bracket. I will remove these. Now I will just put them into now we need to cut each and every value from here and place them accordingly. So I will say equal to this, just like this. Field is equal to value. Let's do this for all. I will pause the video and continue later on. As you can see, we are referring to form 1 everywhere, and we need to refer to form 2 because that is what we are using for updating the content. So I will just change all of these to form 2. Form 2. Now we need to add the where clause. Where, and we need to take the value from contact data. Here the value will come from contact data. And which field will we take the value of? We will take the value of the ID field over here, where ID is equal to contact data dot value dot ID. This completes our update statement. So now we have created necessary features for adding a contact and for updating an existing contact. So let's test them. Then we will go for creating the other feature for deleting a contact. So I will go to this button and I will add an event handle to controller component modal 1 open modal. I'll open this modal over here. In this modal, I will select the submit button. I will add an event for this. I will say run data query and I will say add contact. So what will it do? It run the query for add contact over here. And this query will read everything from form 1 and save it into the database. Okay. Here we have forgotten to add one more feature, that is to add the event handle for database. So if sorry, that's something funny, double. On success, we want to run a data query and it will be get contacts. That same thing we would need to do for update over here. On success, run a data query and it would be get contacts. Okay, so now let's test the whole thing. I will click over here. It should show the form. I will select Mr. dummy name, dummy middle, dummy last. I will just fill in the fields that are mandatory. By default the contact will be active, so I will click on submit. So now the submit button will have to call add contact, and I will also have to add another event for hide. So I'll say controller component and modal 1. I will say close modal. Now let's click on this to save this value, and here it is. The value is saved and it's reloaded over here. If you go to our Supabase, we will see that the value has appeared over here. Why did not refresh? There we have the value, dummy name, dummy name. Okay, now let's try and edit this. So for that, I will click on edit. I will change this name. My first name. Middle name. last name, line 1, line 2, my city, my pin code, state, let's take the first country. I will put in a dummy mobile number. I will say active is equal to false and I will submit this. So here also we have to add the necessary events to update this. So I will click on the add event. I will say run query. I will say update context. Then I will add one more and I will say control component modal number 2 and I will say close modal. Let's click on this button. It should update, cannot run, error, execution, syntax error at position 1. Okay, let's check our update contact query. I found the error. We are naming this in the wrong way. This has to be 2. If you remember, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. I just this is to be 1. Okay. Now let's do it again. Change this to female and I will say submit. Okay, what is the spelling mistake? DAT update. Let me run it from here. Okay, it's done. So there was a spelling mistake over here and the values were coming blank because we had forgotten to give the exact name. Anyway, so this happens when you are duplicating and using copy paste. So we need to be a bit careful about all these things. Now that this part is done, now we need to do one more thing, and that is to delete a contact. So for deleting a contact, we need to follow the same technique that we had followed when we were building the to-do app. We need to confirm the action from the user, and once the action is confirmed, then we need to delete the record, not before that. Let's select the delete column. Over here we will need to select run JavaScript. I will pop it open over here and I will say if the user says yes, we need to run the delete query. Again, we have not yet created that data query, so I will just keep it empty over here at present, and then we will do the needful. So let's go and first create a data query. Let's see what we need to do for creating a data query. It's just simple. We need to use delete from table and the where clause to delete it. So over here it would be add a query, use contact manager, rename the query as delete contact, select it again and say delete from contact where id is equal to dot selected row dot id. So this will go and delete this. Again over here also we need to set the event handle. On success, run data query and get context. Now again we need to go to the delete column, open up the coding over here and we need to call delete contact dot run. That's it. We do not need to do anything else. Let's fold this, close this and click on delete. It would say, are you sure you want to delete this? I would say okay. It will go and delete it and refresh the thing. So this completes all the features that we had discussed. I will just try to recapitulate everything so that it becomes easier for us. First thing, we need to define a connection and then use that connection to execute various queries on the database. The first thing we need to do is to get the data. Then we need to create a data query to add data, one data query to update the data and a data query to delete the data. And then we need to wire each and everything together. This is it. So again, if you observe, the amount of coding that we have to write is very, very limited compared to what we may have to do with other tools. Let's preview this application to see whether it's working properly or not. Okay, I will say add I will select mesh female email com active, and I will submit it. This should add this data. I should be able to edit this data. I'm just changing the name. I'm keeping the rest of the things as it is, and I will click on the submit button, and it should go and update the data. Now let's delete this data. Okay, so our application is working properly as expected. I will share this application with everybody so that you can use it, but please change the connection and use your own Supabase database, because after a few days I will be removing this particular database from my Supabase account, so the software may not work as it is. So let's go over here. I will click on share. I will say make this app public. I will say publish the app, and I will click on finish. From here I will click on publish. And there it is. We have published the application, and now you should be able to find this application on the marketplace. So let's go to the marketplace, and contact manager should be somewhere over here. Contact manager. Thank you.